Hi, I'm Angela Dominguez, and it's week 2 of the Global Read Out Loud. I'm actually going to be answering your questions this week from a hotel room in Denver because I'll be out there for a conference. So little Petunia won't be with me, and I thought I would have her say hello to you all, and so that you could see her just a little bit. I also wanted to share with you a surprise I got in the mail, which is the second Stella Diaz book, Stella Diaz Never Gives Up, and it comes out January 14th of 2020, and I'm super excited about it. And that's it for now. Let's begin the questions and say goodbye to Petunia for this week, right? Bye. Good morning. I am in Denver, Colorado for that conference. You might notice two things. Petunia's not here. She's back home in Richmond, Virginia, which is where I live, and I know a lot of you guys are curious about that. Secondly, I'm wearing my glasses. A lot of times when I travel, I put them on instead of my contacts, and I have been wearing my glasses since I was 10 years old. But I thought I would begin with actually the book giveaway before the questions. So I received 70 schools that contacted me with questions, and I'm just so amazed and blown away by all of this. I never imagined so many classrooms being engaged in reading and having curiosities about the book. It's just simply amazing. So thank you again. But for the book giveaway, I did the random number generator, and out of the 70 schools, it came up with number 66, and that is Mrs. Pennington's class in Tucson, Arizona at Sunrise Drive Elementary. And you guys are going to win a copy of Stella Diaz Has Something to Say, signed by me, and this is the cool part. Stella Diaz Never Gives Up. This isn't the advanced reader. It does not come out until January, so you're getting a really cool sneak peek preview of the book. So congrats, and now let's begin the questions. So now I'm going to begin the questions. Number 1, from Miss Gorman's class, Levi wanted to know, what school did you go to in 3rd grade? So I grew up in the Dallas area, and I went to Dale B. Davis Elementary. From Miss Victor's class at the International School in Cambodia. Wow. Lee, I wanted to know, do you always illustrate your own books? So I do. Whenever I write the story, I always illustrate it, but I do think it would be really fun maybe one day to me write the story and have someone else draw the pictures and see, because I am always on the other side of that. I always draw the pictures for somebody else's stories when I'm just the illustrator. So it'd be fun to have the role reversed. Now, from Emma in Colorado Springs, and I believe it's Mrs. Barton's class. Why did you choose to start the story with talking about food? That's a great question. I wanted to show that that Stella was Mexican and that her household was maybe a little different, just like a tiny bit different. And I think one of the best ways to show a culture is through food, because we will experience so many different cultures by eating their food. And I thought this was a way of sharing that. From Mrs. Ferris' class in Ontario, Canada, what part of Texas was Stanley from? Well, because I grew up in the Dallas area, I kind of imagined that he is from Dallas. From the Roper School in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, why did you choose that cover for your book? So the great thing about working with a publisher is that you work with an editor who helps you make your story better, and then an art director, and we worked together as a team to come up with that cover. She did the wonderful hand lettering, and then I came up with the illustrations of Stella and the fishes, and we really collaborated on how the two would work together, and it's so much fun. I've loved doing that for both books. Now, this was a question I got from a lot of kids. Mrs. Thompson's grade 2 class in Millbrook, Ontario. Bryn wants to know who is your favorite character in the book. I really love Stella. She is probably one of my top favorite characters. But I also like Nick quite a bit because I had a really great relationship. I do have a great relationship with my brother, and writing him in a way that was sweet, but also showing like how he was just a typical older brother was a lot of fun to do. Let's see. Emmy from Mademoiselle Gat's grade 2 class at JS Buchanan French Immersion School. Did you do read out louds when you were little? I did. So, my first grade teacher, named Mrs. Bell, might sound familiar, she read out loud to us James and the Giant Peach and Help I'm a Prisoner in the library, and I have fond memories of both of those books because of that. And then from the second graders at Bryant Elementary School in Mrs. Rhodes' class, I believe. Why did you make one character think and talk more than others? That's a really great question. Because it's Stella's story, I thought I would write it in first person, meaning that we would get a sense of how she felt and what she was thinking, and that way we could relate more to Stella. And you know, again, like the story would be so different, right? If I wrote it from maybe Stanley's perspective, or if I wrote it from like observing everyone. So like that's a really good way to think about when you're writing the story. Who do you want to make the important focus of your story? Let's see. From Mrs. Figg's class at Dooley Elementary in Plano, Texas, which I grew up in Carrollton, so very close to you guys. Fatima wanted to know, is your birthday during the Global Read Out Loud? No, it's just a couple weeks later. It's on November 29th, which relates to the next question. Hajar in Mrs. Hedit's class at Wilford Drury Public School in Ontario, Canada. My zodiac sign is a Sagittarius. So thank you, Hajar, and I'm glad that you're a Gemini. Let's see. From Mr. Saywick's third grade class in Grand Ledge, Michigan, do you make a bondigas? I do. I still think my mom makes the best, but I think my bondigas are pretty good. And I think the things that really make it a little bit more like Mexican flavors are the bay leaf and the cilantro, and then garlic. I mean, you got to put garlic in there. And we always use saltines instead of breadcrumbs. I don't know where my mom came up with that, but it tastes really good actually. From Miss Clark's class, what foods do you miss most from Mexico? So I feel like when I'm in Mexico, I get the best versions of some of my favorite foods. Like mole is just so great in Mexico, and like chilaquiles, oh, that's the best thing to have for breakfast. And even like the tacos and the tamales are better, and the tamales can be very different there. Like instead of a corn leaf, they use a banana leaf, and those are really tasty. From Miss Rogers Taylor's class, or RT's class, why is Stella clumsy? That's a good question. You know, sometimes I have felt clumsy, and a lot of times it was because I was nervous. So I was kind of too caught up in my own head that I would accidentally bump into things, and if I would just be a little shaky. And so because Stella is so much based off of my own experiences, I thought I would incorporate that, and I also thought that might be a familiar feeling to people. From Miss Ruby's class, you guys are learning how to revise and edit your stories, and you're wondering how many drafts do you think I went through. I went easily through a dozen, easily, because I spent a year doing it as a picture book, probably did 4 versions of that, probably did 4 versions of it as a early chapter book, and probably even like 5 or 6 for when I made it into a longer novel. So yeah, it takes a lot of revising. I often tell people I'm a much better editor than I am writer, because a lot of times when I write it, I'm just getting ideas down, but the sentences aren't always pretty, or they don't look as great as they do when they're in the book. It takes time and a lot of revising and editing to make it good. Now, this is a fun question. Mrs. Song's class in Wisconsin, Raluca, I hope I pronounced that correctly, she wanted to know what I wanted to be before I became an illustrator and an author. So I think it's really great to have a lot of curiosities and give yourself time to figure out what you love to do. Although if you know what you want to do now, that's great. I thought about being an architect because I loved building so much. I also just thought about being a regular painter, like in a gallery, because that sounded so cool. I also thought about being a lawyer. So I had a few different things. What I love about what I do is like it takes a lot of research, and I feel like the idea of building structure in a story is kind of like similar to being an architect. So I think some of those jobs kind of relate to or interests relate to what I do now. Now, let's see. From Miss Andrews' second grade class at Summit Point Elementary in Missouri, is Stanley going to be a character in the second Stella book? Yes. So he is, because spoiler alert, they end up being friends. So he is in the next book. Now, from Mrs. Wigg's fourth grade class in Bloomington, Illinois, do you still speak Spanish? So I do. I grew up like Stella, where I spoke a couple of words and I couldn't speak in complete sentences. Then I started taking classes in high school, and that helped. And then as an adult, I took classes for about 2 years, and that has really helped me become fluent. I will say I'm still kind of a little shy about speaking, but I love when I get the opportunity to speak it, and I usually speak it with my mom or with my family that lives in Mexico. And then let's just do 2 more for this first video. I got this from a lot of schools. This is Mrs. Pritchett's third grade class in Florida. Is the Fantastic Time Machine restaurant based on a real restaurant? So it is. We decided to change it, but it's called the Magic Time Machine. The one I went to was in Addison, Texas. It was just in the Dallas area. And they really dressed up in costumes. They even had like the salad bar in a old car. And like as a kid, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I had a couple of birthday parties there. And then the final one for this video, from Adams Elementary in Spokane Valley, Washington. Leanne wants to know, what does Stella DIAZ remind you of? So when I was writing the book, I thought of a couple other of my favorite books growing up and even as an adult, and I thought of Ramona and the Ramona Quimby series, and I also thought of the Alvin Ho series, and I think that's about it for Stella. But yeah, those books really helped a lot. I also enjoyed the Cecilia Lee Jenkins series. I felt like there was a kindred spirit there, and it was inspirational when I was trying to write my Stella too. So, thank you. This is the first set. Stay tuned for the second video.